All right, guys. Hey, welcome. Today, I have a special guest on my podcast. This is my son. This is Aiden. And the reason I wanted to do this is because I truly feel that, especially this day and age, many parents feel either disconnected with their teenagers, with their kids, and also just maybe needing some insight as to what is it that teenagers truly want? What is it that we as parents, what can we do to better help the situation? Expectations, maybe what is too much, what is not too much, just all the things that I know can keep us up at night. And so I just thought, what better way? Because it's much different than when I was a teenager. I was a teenager in the 90s. I was a kid in the 80s. And it wasn't perfect then, but it is much different now. And we all know they are facing a completely different world than what we were facing. So I'm glad to have him on. He's a good sport. And so this is Aiden. Yay! Welcome, Aiden. So I'm going to have you just introduce yourself. You can tell me a little bit about yourself. I mean, I know stuff about you, but the public, all the people out there listening to the podcast.
I'm Aiden. I'm the oldest son. And I am a certified drone pilot.
He's a certified drone pilot.
I think that's the most important thing that you need to know about me is that I can fly a drone.
Well, but I can't fly drones. I was when I was your age, there don't even know if drones were around, but if they were, I would not have been a certified drone pilot. He got that last spring, right? Through
Through the high school.
Yeah. Well, very cool. So, all right. So I sent him some questions when I said, hey, I'm going to have you as a guest. Is that cool? I don't know if I really even gave you the option to opt out, but I just felt in my heart, if this podcast is to really reach people and help people out, what better way to help people out than just to get some insight from a kid this day and age? So are you okay if we just kind of jump right into it?
Yeah. Why not? Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, Aiden also, what he didn't tell you, he is an avid athlete. He likes to play all different kinds of sports. What would you say your favorite sport is?
Oh, football.
Football. I was going to guess that, but sometimes you never know. All right. So, and for those of you that don't know, my husband used to coach football for over 20 years. So that may or may not have had some influence on Aiden growing up wanting to play football. So he no longer coaches, not officially. He does from the stands. So
Yeah. Before my football days, I was really avid in basket weaving.
okay. Yeah. All right. Nice try. Okay. So we're just going to jump straight to the questions. Okay. So I was going to ask you the first question, and you said you answer it as honest as you need to. And we talked about this beforehand. I said, don't feel like you have to sugarcoat things because I'm the mom asking. I feel like this would be really helpful for a lot of people. So the first question is, what do you feel like are the biggest obstacles facing teenagers today?
That's a really good question. I would say the biggest obstacle, and especially like talking to some of my friends and stuff like that, is that really is either they're being pushed by outside forces, and when by outside forces, it's for some people it's schoolwork, to excel in school. Some people it is sports. We see that especially in the baseball realm. Um, But what I would say really some of the biggest obstacles is like honestly for a lot of people I talk to is mental health.
Yeah.
Um yeah,
And
I mean we go through the same world as adults. I mean, yeah, do we have as much responsibilities? No. But at the same time, it's like we teenagers do have emotions and have feelings and all that. And I mean, it's just we're not just I guess the best way to describe it is that we're part of the world too. Even though we're young and we're still about to spread our wings and fly, we are still part of the world.
right. And when you say mental health, can you get a little more specific with that?
Yeah, mental health. Some of the biggest obstacles really is like what I've seen is that you have to like look certain ways and feel certain ways to be loved by other people.
Mm,
Whereas really it's like if not, you might be outcasted. There's just you have to fit in someone's group in order
mm,
for you to really feel loved. And I
okay.
think that's really the biggest obstacle that kids face is them just trying to find love and find acceptance into the world and who they are and where their identity lies. I think that's really the biggest obstacle is where does their identity lie in? For some, it's sports, for some, it's schools, for some, it's band. And I'm not saying those are bad; those are all great, but really, it's just they're trying to find their identity.
Yeah. Yeah. Find their spot.
Yeah.
Right. And that's not so different than when I was in high school. There was a lot of cliques, a lot of different groups and things like that. And I think that's normal. If you're just to say almost everywhere, it's been that way for a while and it still is. Do you feel like in your generation, um, social media comes into play quite a bit?
Yeah.
It's quite different. That is what is different between your generation and mine.
So I think one of my favorite things that I got to be able to do was this past year I went with Young Life and I went to one of their camps. And the speaker, he was from like Tennessee or something like that. And I love what he did because what he did, he didn't say the kids' names. What he did is he pulled up their Instagrams and read off the captions and the posts. And then he told a little backstory about that person. Where really it's like, yeah, their world may look put together, but in reality, it's not.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things where as kids, it's easy to look at that and go, they're so put together. They have the perfect life. They mean their mom and dad love them and stuff like that. And that's what I feel like I've thought through like years and years and years is just like really like they're really athletic and stuff like that. Well, what I didn't see is that yeah, they're really athletic, but at the same time, that is all their parents focus on. Whereas I feel like I've been in a better place and like blessed. Whereas like I understand that athletics is not where my identity lies. And I think it took a little bit for me to realize that. But I would say mainly it's like the comparison game is yeah, it's still out there, especially with social media is a giant big role in it.
Yeah. So what would you say to parents that maybe the parents out there that are trying to help their children not make that their one identity, whether it be
Mhm.
sports, maybe it's academics, maybe it's band, maybe it's nothing to do with school. Maybe their one identity is something that the world puts out there that you have to be, maybe looking a certain way, acting a certain way, and they've wrapped that up as in their identity. And there's parents out there that are struggling, really trying to find, like, get through to their own kids that this is not your identity. This is just a part of who you are. It's not who you are. So, what would you say to those parents that find themselves right smack dab in the middle of that struggle? That they're trying to get their kids to realize that, but their kids, they know their kids are going to have to see it for themselves. But as parents, we kind of want to guide them the right way.
Um, I would say like to parents and stuff like that struggle with that is parents really where does your identity lie? And I think if you really look at that and
You're
where
asking the parents that?
yeah,
Okay.
if you self-evaluate that and go, where does my identity lie? At the end of the day, what am I going to chase after? And I think if parents really answered that, I think that's mainly where it tends where they try to force their kids down the same path. And I'm not saying that what I mean by that is like if the parent's identity is so much involved into sports, what are they going to want to do? They want their kid to excel in sports. If the parent's identity is so involved in playing in a band, what does they want their kid to do? They want to be musically talented.
Mhm.
And I think that's really what it is. It's parents, it's where does your identity lie? And I'm not saying like, yes, your kid's identity may be something else and your identity may be completely opposite. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think for most parents that are struggling with it, it's mainly because they haven't really found their identity.
Okay. All right. So on that, I want to ask you, what if there's a parent that is just trying to help their kid find that they don't have to have an identity in something, that's not how they're trying to push their child the right way. And by the right way, I don't mean, oh, you have to be in sports or you have to be in all these extracurricular to be the right way. What I mean is, what if there's parents out there that are truly just trying to let their kids know that they are loved, that they are seen, that they're not all just an athlete, they're not all just who they try to present themselves at school or around their friends, but the kids are not seeing it? What if the parent is completely okay in their identity?
If the parent's completely okay in their identity, but the kid isn't, I would say honestly, the best you can do is support your kid.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
What I mean by supporting your kid is that,
Like, how would you say supporting looks to you?
what I mean by identity mainly is that, in my opinion, and this is just me, this isn't just something that's been forced upon me. This is just me looking at it, is that there's only one identity, and that's in Christ Jesus as Christians.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really like where I'm talking about this one identity. I'm not, yes, like sports and stuff like that. But what I mean by identity is like at the end of the day, if we came down and just broke you down by down by down, what is the centerpiece of your life? And I think that's identity to me.
Right.
So I would say for parents who found their identity,
How do they support their kids when their kids are struggling to find their own?
I mean,
And you said support them. So does you mean just
there is, yes, support him, but at the same time, there's so far where an identity can go. I'm also gonna say that. I think kids should be supported, yes, for like sports and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, sports is not going to fulfill you. And identity is something that's should fulfill you and that you can be pleased with. And I'm not going to lie, most of the people on my football team are not going to go on to be collegiate athletes. I'm sorry, that's just the hard truth. Only a select few are. I'm not saying I am. I'm nowhere near that level of talent. But at the end of the day, your identity needs to be something that will last forever.
right. So how do parents support their kids in finding that? What can they best do
I think the best,
as a kid yourself
yeah,
at this age?
so I would say the best thing a parent could do, and I know this is like, I'm trying to answer the question, but I'm also trying to really like dig deep into the question.
But and what if you just kept it simple? What do kids want from their parents when they're struggling?
When kids are struggling, the one thing that they're going to need is grace and love. Yeah, and I think that's one of the things is like it may be different with kids, but like with some kids, it may be that the fear of punishment. But at the same time, I think the best way you can look at it is we should put on a balance. Is do some things need punishment? Yes, but the same time, excuse me, some things need grace.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm saying that if you lean one way or the other, it could possibly be bad. If all you do is punish, 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 that kid isn't going to be understand what grace is. But at the same time, if your kid's just grace, 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 your kid's going to be all over the place and he's going to think everything's okay because there's grace. There should be an equal balance.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's my thing. But going back to it, parents, I would say honestly, just help your kid as much as possible to help find that identity.
Yeah.
And what I mean by this is like be involved, be interested, dig with it, ask them questions. Because I mean they don't need to be alone when trying to find that identity.
Yeah. When you say ask questions, do you mean
Just general questions like how was your day, stuff like that. And I mean, don't get me wrong, you asked me that and I'm like good, and that's pretty much how it goes. But at the same time, like
him and his brother, it's like good, we're good.
Well, what I know is that she was interested in my day.
So even though at the time it felt like, or maybe I took it like I feel like I'm annoying him because it's always I'm good, like one word answers. You still needed it.
Yeah. And I mean, if something's up, I mean, yeah, I'll tell you.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there's also like some things that I'm like I gotta go pray about it.
Right.
Like I'm gonna put it in God's hands.
Yeah. 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 So that leads me to a question as parents. A lot of times, especially this day and age, it's well, I think at any age, it's hard for parents if the parents want to get their child more involved in church, to make it more of a priority, but the child, the teenager, I say child, but I mean that like you'll always be my child, even when like
Mhm.
you're 60 years old, you'll still be my child. So what I mean that though is when they want their child to be more involved in church, more maybe draw closer to God, maybe not necessarily church or religion, or maybe the whole shebang, maybe all of it, but they want them to draw closer to God, but the child is reluctant. Tell me what you think is the best thing they could do and maybe the worst thing they could do,
I would,
coming
yeah.
from your perspective.
Here's my thing. I'm gonna go back and here's my thing. Parents' priorities. If church isn't a priority, how you expect your kid to make it a priority? I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. If you're not involved in the church and trying to grow deeper in your faith, how do you expect your kid to do that? And I think that's one of the things where it's like I saw something on Instagram the other day and I found it phenomenal, which is like 9 reasons why Christians should go to sporting events. It's like
9
because
reasons why they shouldn't.
why they shouldn't. And it was
Oh,
giving basically
okay.
the reason why people don't go to church is because, well, I wanted to sleep in, or oh, he talks too long. But at the same time, it's like you're willing to stay up like extremely late on excuse me, you're willing to wake up very early on a Saturday morning to watch someone go play golf. I mean, or to go play golf. It's just stuff like that. So my thing is like, parents, the reason why I see kids my age not involved in the church and leaving the church is either number one, the parents don't make it a priority, or number two, they've just never been told about it. And I would say you're not going to see a change in a kid's life if you don't either make it a priority or you tell them who God is. I think it comes down to the end of the day. If you don't make church priority, and let's say every single weekend it's stacked up with baseball games or football games or whatsoever, why should they see it as a priority when all you said is that no, football's a priority or baseball's a priority? And that's what I see with like some of my friends.
Yeah. Yeah. So my next question, and you've kind of hit on this, we've already kind of talked about it, but I'm just going to ask directly, is what do teenagers in general want most from their parents? I know you said, support, but I mean, and this isn't necessarily about an issue, just in general. Like, what do you feel like kids, especially this day and age,
What they need from their parents.
what do they want most from their parents?
I think honestly, what kids want most from their parents is the truth. And
And
what I mean by the truth is like what I've noticed is like going to like certain youth groups. What I've noticed is that kids want to have those difficult conversations, even though it may seem like we don't. Kids want to have those conversations, like why it's wrong or stuff like that. But at the same time, I love the saying is that when the church doesn't preach, the world does. And I think
yeah,
that's something
yeah,
that we honestly had to take in. So my thing is like, parents, don't be afraid of the difficult conversations. Don't. In matter of fact, I encourage you to embrace them head on and just tell them the truth. But at the same time, like what I said, is that I want to go back to that punishment and grace balance. Because at the same time, if kids are always in fear of just punishment, I mean, how are they going to live it? I mean, don't get me wrong. It's like, yes, does there need to be punishment? Yes, but at the same time, there needs to be grace. And it's
yeah.
vice versa. If there's too much grace, sorry, I've seen kids run rampant.
Mhm.
There has to be that equal balance.
Mhm. Well, and grace is in turn like embracing the fact, like, okay, that wasn't right. That's not how it
Mhm.
should be done. I'm not saying it's okay, but I'm letting you know it's okay to be human, but it's not an excuse to go and do it again.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah. That's what I mean. I'm not
Yeah.
talking about like it's okay. Like that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like grace, where what I like grace is pretty much to me is like It's almost love. Love covers a multitude of sins.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the best way to describe grace, is that love covers a multitude of sin. Like, yeah, you made the mistake, but I still love you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think if kids don't feel love, then they're just, why would they listen to you? They're going to listen to something that loves them.
So kids, you would say, or would you say, and just correct me if I'm wrong, are you saying that the bottom line is kids just want to know they're loved
I mean, I think it's
from
more
their
than,
parents?
yeah, from their parents. Yeah. But at the same time, yeah, it's great to have the love from your parents. But I think they also want to know that like somebody also loves them. And I feel like that's why some people put all their time and all that into girls to feel that short
You
love.
mean somebody outside of their parents?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or some people might put it into addictions such as drugs or alcohol or even pornography, because what they're trying to do is fill that void, is try to fill that gap, which, yeah, the parents may love them. That's true. But at the same time, both kids who are loved and unloved seem to stumble because they're trying to find something also.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the biggest things, is that they're also trying to find love somewhere else. Because I think they need to find love that they know that will last. Because unfortunately, I mean, parents, you're not always going to be on this earth.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that your kid doesn't love you, but if all your kid does is put all of his love, faith, and trust into you, what are they going to do when you're gone?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that to scare you. I'm trying to say that honestly.
Yeah. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit here, I guess, pivot just a little bit. And I want to ask you, what about the parent out there that does not have a good connection with their teenager, but wants a better connection? Maybe it's something that was said or done in the past on the parent, teenager, both, whatever. Maybe it's not. Maybe just outside influence has kind of created this chasm, this canyon between the parent and their kid. What would you say? What can they do to, now, they can't force their kid to want to be around them and do all these things. But as a parent, as a kid that felt disconnected from their parent, what do you think they would want that parent to do? Or what can a parent do? What would you advise coming from somebody your age?
I want to say
Basically to make them feel seen.
Yeah. So number one, are you involved? Are you involved in their life? And it doesn't have to be, yeah, I'm involved in their life. I go to sporting events. No. Are you involved? Are you asking them questions when they come home? Are you honestly checking in and caring on them? Or are you just, you're there, but you're not emotionally present or socially present?
So they're there in body, but they're not
There in like
They're not.
emotionally.
Yeah.
So that's my number one thing. Another thing where I also see is that the parent did something that just sticks with the child. And what I mean by that is, like, it may not just be the parent, but also the child. But I think honestly, it's just they want to hear a sorry from someone. And it may be that the teenager needs to say sorry. Yes. I'm not saying teenagers always in right. But at the same time, I think we're all humans. And at times parents do make those mistakes. And that all the kid wants to hear is, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I think the worst thing you can do is talk out of anger. I think that is the worst thing you can do as a parent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. Yes, there's fury in the moment when something happens. I understand. But at the same time, take a second to breathe and calm down. And I think and people are like, it's cheesy, but one of the greatest friends, what would Jesus do? Jesus got angry. But at the same time, the tongue speaks life and death.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that's one of the biggest things, where it's a parent can say something and it will stick with that kid for the rest of their life, or all they think about is that moment.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, it's just be more engaged, be slow to talk in anger and actions in anger. I think that's one of the biggest things, especially with some parents. Because I've been around some of my friends' parents where it's like it was just like that, and I'm like I'm just like tense, or I'm
Mhm.
uptight.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas like when I get some of my parents or some of my friends here, it's like I know like they're comfortable because
Mhm.
it's not just anger. It's not like it's got to be this.
Now don't get him wrong. Don't get us wrong. There are moments where I have spoken out of anger. There are moments where we feel like I do feel like it has to be a certain way. I have to catch myself. But that was I will say long before coaching, when I reached out and got my own coach, and then learned all about, first one, giving myself grace as a parent, and to the parents out there. And I've talked about this on the podcast multiple times. Yeah, that would be our corgi in the background. When he decides to bark, it's okay. I don't even know if the mic picks it up, but if you hear something weird in the background,
That's why I'm laughing.
that's our dog. Anyway, but for me, I had to give myself grace because I was covered with mom guilt. Um, we all know that, well, if you're a first time parent, you grow up with your oldest kid. You learn so much through your oldest kid. And with that being said, there were times I would put Aiden to bed and I just felt awful because I didn't handle a situation right. I came home, I was tired. He was ready to go. He always had so much energy. Still does. Like, it's crazy. But as a parent, when I was a working mom, and I mean, I'm still a working mom, but when I was still in education, and then my husband was coaching 7 days a week, there were times I was just worn out and I could have handled situations better. I should have learned to walk away. I don't even like saying the word should, because it doesn't good. That doesn't do any good to ourselves. But I learned through coaching to give myself grace for I'm not a perfect parent. There are days where I'm a good mom and there's days where I'm a bad mom. Life is 50-50. There's days where we go to work and we kill it. And there's days where we go to work and we're just not there. As a student, you go to school and there's days you're on it. And then there's days you're just kind of breathing as you're going through the day. You're a mouth breather. So anyway, what I'm saying is, for the parents listening out there and that are struggling, trying to connect with their teenagers, and if you know in your heart, listen, I've said I've done things that I regret. I talk out of anger. I act out of anger, whatever that might be. This, when I say give yourself grace, that doesn't mean, oh, well, you're just, I can't forgive you. Only God can forgive you. But go to God directly, ask him for forgiveness, and then in turn realize, okay, I'm not a perfect parent, but I'm on my way to being a better parent, the best parent I can. Because I will tell you this, and this is something I learned through coaching too, is you are the exact mom or dad for that kid. It was not by mistake that you became a parent to that child. God didn't accidentally, oh, whoops, that kid was not supposed to be in that family. You are the exact parent that child needs. And if you know, well, if I'm the exact parent, but I'm not happy about how I've behaved, then, or things that I've done, this is where, one, you go to God, you talk to him, forgiveness, and then give yourself grace. And then, like Aiden said, go to your kid, apologize. As hard as it may be, it might be very hard. Some of you might have grown up in homes where there was no such thing as an apology. And that can be very uncomfortable. And that, I'm just going to let you know, that's normal. That's natural. So I'm just talking from a parent's perspective, because I know there were times just as a parent, like, hey, how's your day? Good. It's good. And you feel like, well, I just want them to know I love them and I do want to know about their day and what was the best part of the day, what was the worst part of the day, whatever it might be. And when you feel like that they don't really seem to care to respond, we can take it as, oh, well, they don't care about us, but that's not true. Right. So like those days where you're like, even as teenagers, sometimes teenagers have their ways of acting that maybe aren't
Yeah,
the best.
I've had those days. But I will say the one thing that's really, like you said though, but personally, the reason like why like we have a strong foundation, our relationship, is because of she's not prideful, and what I mean by that is that she'll humble herself, and then she will tell me she's sorry, and I know she's sorry. Someone saying, "I'm sorry," and like you walk off. She says, "I'm sorry," and I know she's sorry because I know at that moment, like I said, punishment and grace. Well, yeah, I was mad when she said it, yeah, who was right, who was wrong gets thrown out the window at that point. I was mad when she said it, but I know at the end of the day, she is sorry for what she said. And I know that if she would have gone back, she wouldn't have done it. And I think that's one of the biggest things is also parents, can you humble yourselves and tell your kid that you're sorry? Because at the same time, it will also teach your kid to humble themselves and tell the others that they're sorry.
All right. So I have a question, and that's true though, because, and it can be hard. It can be hard if words were exchanged between both, to be the one to go and say you're sorry first, because sometimes pride does get in the way. And I'm not going to say I'm sorry first. They need to say they're sorry. And because, and maybe the kid started it, who knows? But whatever, at the end of the conversation, and it can happen at the end of the conversation, you've not acted in a way that is your true self, where you're coming from a place of love, right? So it is important to humble yourself. And it's not always easy, because sometimes you feel justified in the anger, right?
And to really back that, I don't mean cut you off, but to really back that up, I think it's First Corinthians where it says, like, don't let the sun go down on your back whenever you're still mad at your brother. And it doesn't literally mean, it doesn't mean your physical brother. It can be your son, daughter, replace brother with anybody. Don't let the sun go down on your back if you're mad at someone. Because at the same time, it's going to tear you up.
Right. Right. But let cooler heads prevail
Yeah.
before you do go and have a conversation, and maybe no agenda. Don't go in thinking, well, I'm going to say I'm sorry, and I'm hoping they say they're sorry too, because if you go in there with that, like, I'm going to go tell Aiden, I'm sorry, we had an argument, and he's going to say he's sorry, or he needs to, because he said some things. That is where you got to go in and you apologize, regardless if they come back and say they're sorry back to you. If, oh, mom, thank you so much, I love you for that. Nothing. Like, you are setting the example. And I think that's kind of what you were talking about. You need to set the example. And you feel like maybe a lot of parents today, for whatever reason, are holding themselves back from doing that. Maybe they're not sure. The world can be, it is quite different. And I think parents sometimes feel intimidated about, how do I parent my child in this kind of world? This is foreign to me, what they're facing. I don't even know how to work through it. But our God is bigger than all of this. None of this is a surprise to him. And none of this is too big for him. And that's when you lean into him first. So, on a final note, for the parents out there that it's just been a struggle to have a good relationship with their kid, whether it be 12 years old all the way up to 19, whatever, even if it's adult children, right? But we're kind of talking about your age group in particular. He's 17. So for those parents that have known it's been rough for a few years, it still feels rough, they're in the middle of it, what encouragement would you give them today?
It's not lost. Yeah, at some point, and I think is the best way is like the prodigal son is like, yeah. And I mean, you can take that both. Like the way I see the prodigal son is like, for me, is like running from God, like saying yes to God, being in his presence, running from God, then all of a sudden going, what am I doing? And running back to God. That's the way I view the prodigal. But at the same time, when Jesus told it was, yeah, the kid left, but he came back. And I'm not saying that the kid's gonna come back. And I want your kid to come back. That's not what I'm saying. I want them to, but at the same time, the best thing you can do is pray about it. I think the best thing that you can do is pray about, no matter what you do, is pray about. Find a time of day, just anything. It can be short, sweet. It can be long, complex. Pray about it. God wants to hear you, wants to talk to you. He wants to know. Cast all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. And I think really talk to him. And that's my thing. It's that, yeah. And at the same time, you're like, well, how do I pray? It's simple, just talking and just finishing off with amen. That's all it is. It doesn't have to be some dear God and then this long complex, like you have to sound like a preacher. God, that's not what it is. It's genuine and sincere, and at the same time, God knows what you're going to pray for before you even pray it. I mean, That's the thing. So my thing is, the best thing you can do is, don't shut the door on them, but at the same time, pray about it.
Well, that's very sage advice. It's very good. So thank you. And I appreciate your time and coming here. As you can tell, he's kind of tired. And those of you, if you're not watching
Working.
the YouTube video, he was over here yawning and stretching.
She's talking. I'm back
And I'm
here
not
just
going to edit any of that out. It's just going to be what it is. So I hope this helps any of you right now, especially as we enter the holiday season and we're around each other a lot more. Just that there is hope, that there is no relationship too far gone if you put it in the hands of God. That is the bottom line. And God sees, he did not create us to be perfect parents. He did not create your kids to be perfect kids. And so with that, just I hope that maybe some tokens of wisdom were taken from this, that you could understand that sounds like what your kids want most is just to be seen, to be loved.
Yeah.
And
That's mainly what they struggle with.
even as they're very hard to love.
Yeah. And I mean, I've come across those kids too, where it's like, oh my gosh, you make it impossible. But at the same time, those are the kids that probably need it most.
Mm.
But what I also want to finish off with, kind of cap it off with, is at the same time, my last note is just something you can think about is, what are your priorities? What is your identity in? That's all I want to ask you as parents and as kids. What is your identity in? What's your focus on? Because here's the thing, because I've done it. I did it for 16 to 17 years. You can search the world, and yes, it's going to give you temporary happiness. But at the end of the day, you're going to be left broken, unseen, and unloved, or it's just going to fade away. And there's one thing that I've known and that I've trusted for a few months now, really. I played the whole like Christian face game where I'd have a mask on and like I wear a cross. I'm a Christian. But when I finally put 100% into Jesus, not 100% in football or 100% into my friends or girls or parties, my life has changed. I'm happier. I know where my identity is. And at the same time, at the same time,
It's okay.
At the same time, I know God's got me, and his love has not failed since. And you're like, it's a sappy message. Sure, whatever. But at the same time, I'm telling you, give Jesus a shot. And for some of you, it may only take till you're 8 years old, but at the same time, it may take till you're 99. Just give it a shot, because I've known Jesus has not disappointed me one day yet. Even in my storms, he's not disappointed me.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it, kiddo. All right. Well, thank you for tuning in. Guys, I hope wherever you're at, I hope there's someone out there that got something from this. I think so. We as parents tend to really wonder what's going on in our kids' minds, and we read the news, we see the posts, we get on social media. It can be very overwhelming. So Aiden, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. I appreciate it. This has been fun. I hope you have fun. Right? This is not his first podcast. I was hoping I would be the first podcast he was on. He got interviewed through his school podcast, right?
Yeah, I got interviewed through that.
They beat me to the punch. I was already thinking I was going to interview him, and then I saw it. I was like, "What?"
So if you need me on another podcast.
All right. So on that note, guys, have a great day, and until next time.